Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode. So we have a sponsor for today's episode. It is Taylor Smith Design. And I have been using the services for, almost over a year now. I use the do-it-yourself services, and it makes posting on my social media so much easier. Seriously. They have a user-friendly platform where I can schedule all of my posts for the whole year on multiple social sites at the same time. The best part about that is that I can create recurring posts, so I don't have to constantly redo the same thing, which works great when promoting my books. Plus, if you run multiple businesses like I do, since I'm my kid's momager, you can hook it up to multiple accounts. One price for all of your needs, and it saves me so much time. Depending on the level that you sign up for, it can do so much more than just that. I'm still trying to figure out some of the features that it offers. If you need an affordable solution for your social media needs, then go to getseensocial.ca, use code Write or Die to get your first month totally free. All right. Who doesn't like free? Remember, you want to go to getseensocial.ca and use the code Write or Die. Get that first month free. Hello. So today with us, we have a Casey Grifant. How are you?
Great.
Excellent. Where are you joining us from?
San Diego, so it's a little early here.
Oh.
But sunny at least. That's good.
We have gloomy and wind. We actually have a wind warning right now.
Oh no.
But no snow. So it's okay.
Where are you again?
I'm in Canada by Niagara Falls.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's not bad. We've had a very mild winter for sure. So it's not bad. It's just today is excessively windy. There's a window right there, and it's just like the trees are just
I lived on the East Coast for most of my life, actually, but the furthest north was Boston. And those winters were pretty rough. So I wanted to try California after that.
Yeah, I know. I keep saying to my husband, I hate the winter. And he's like, well, we could just move. My husband would love to move to the States. He would. And I'm like, we'll see.
Well, California's pretty nice, so.
It would definitely have to be somewhere warm. I would not be moving anywhere in the northern states at all because the whole point of leaving Canada would be to leave the cold.
Fair.
So, yeah. So who is Casey?
So I'm an author based in San Diego, and I write horror, fantasy, science fiction, and weird Western stories. I've written a lot of short stories that have been published in podcasts, anthologies, magazines, but I finally had my debut novel come out like a week and a half ago. Yeah, and that's a weird Western, so supernatural Western, called Melinda West, Monster Gunslinger, published by Brigids Gate Press. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
But that's what you do. Who are you?
Ooh, that's a philosophical question, huh?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the hardest one of the whole show.
That's fair. Okay, so definitely a writer at heart. I also have two small kids, so I'm kind of in that working mom mode, balancing everything. I have a full-time job as well that I enjoy in science communications.
Oh, okay. What is that like?
Yeah, so it's actually, I started in science journalism, which is basically reporting on science and technology developments and innovations, and then moved into the broader field of science communications, which is more helping like science institutes tell their stories, kind of translating the technical scientific aspects of a paper or a discovery into lay terms for the public. So that might be in a press release or magazine article, website, podcast, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun. Oh, it's great. I get to learn about really cool science and I get to write and edit. So it's a lot of fun.
I had never heard of that job before. So very interesting. Okay, so you moved to California, you got two small children, you like the science and writing. Anything else that we need to know about who you are?
I think those are probably the major components. I mean, I guess like a lot of writers, I'm in my head quite a bit, just imagining things and whatnot.
Yeah,
But I think that's pretty typical for a lot of writers.
yeah, yeah. And something else that's very important about you is you have amazing nail polish. Show it off.
Yeah.
Purple's my favorite color,
Okay.
so
I love
uh,
those.
I'm a little biased.
Nice. Yeah, it almost matches
Clearly,
your
purple's my
backdrop.
favorite color.
Nice.
Okay, so we're gonna jump into the meat and potatoes here. We're gonna
Okay.
talk about mental health. So you start your story wherever makes the most sense.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say anxiety is probably one I've like relatively recently labeled and explored. And it really started, a lot of us are anxious as children, but is it truly like anxiety disorder? It
Hmm.
wasn't until grad school when I was trying to figure out my career and, struggling with relationships somewhat and just kind of feeling a little lost in the world that
Hmm.
I finally kind of had a label for it and started learning tactics for kind of breaking the patterns of negative thinking, which I think, it works to different degrees for different people. And it takes a while, right? Especially in kind of the cognitive behavioral approach where you have these patterns of thoughts you might have had for years or decades. So it's not
Hmm.
like you can instantly break those, right? But just becoming aware of them and trying to assess them a little more logically. Like I still always picture worst case scenarios,
Hmm.
catastrophes, but kind of just accepting it, but also realizing, okay, that's kind of an extreme, unlikely situation. And sure, I can think about it, but I can't let myself become convinced that's going to happen. So that
Okay.
took a long time to kind of learn how to approach thoughts that way, but it's been helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna dig a little more into this. Um, so when did you first actually notice? So I know you were saying in grad school.
Mhm.
So was there like a specific event or a series of events?
Yeah, actually, I would say probably a breakup maybe was like the very specific event where I was just feeling really lost and kind of wanted to break out of this habit of getting into relationships that weren't maybe the most fulfilling, and just that pattern of, okay, why does this keep happening to me? How do I fix it? How do I kind of break the cycle?
Okay. And then how did you, so you noticed that something was going on.
Mhm.
What was your first step to try and break that cycle?
Hmm. Um, the first step. I would say I was a student at the time, so we had resources, thankfully. So kind of starting there and just getting a sense of, what's available. Is it talking to somebody? Is it, reading resources? Is it a little bit of everything? And I kind of firmly believe that everybody talk to, like no matter what their mental state, because there's nothing quite like that outside observer who you can just talk to about whatever, and they'll give you some insight, and just the act obviously of talking can be very helpful as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love going to my therapist and talking it out. Actually, the one week, because I always end up crying while I'm there. And the one week I said, how many boxes of tissues do you go through but every week? And she goes, oh, not even a whole one for the week. I'm like, really? Because I use
Oh.
so many just myself. Oh, okay. So when you decided to go and start talking to somebody, like you said, there was resources there, which is fantastic. And for a lot of people, though, going and using those resources in and of itself is very scary.
Mhm.
So, what were you feeling? Were you like, I'm going, this is good? Or were you like, should I not?
Yeah, I mean, definitely some hesitation, right? Because it's like going to any doctor. You just don't
Hmm.
know, especially if it's the first time, you don't know if they're going to get you, if it's going to be a good experience, if it's going to be a waste of time, which is usually the biggest worry. Um, so I think, kind of that ambivalence, but I think it's also important to mention that, obviously not everybody can do that. So that also makes it tough, right? If you don't have health insurance or you're not a student or whatnot.
Yeah.
there's other resources available, but it's not quite the same, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's kind of important to keep in mind too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you found this person who you must have gotten along with, right?
Yep.
Um, where did you kind of go from there? How long? And I'm going to put quotations around that because I mean, we can always go back to therapists later on, but during that specific time in your life, how long did you talk to the resources on campus and kind of until you felt like you were in a better place at that time?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because they referred me right to someone, and I actually still talk to that person online like once in a while. So it's still ongoing, and it's been what, at least a decade.
Yeah,
So
and that's why I said for that time period, because exactly the first time I went to my therapist is 7 years ago, maybe. But there was also a period of time that I didn't talk to her, right? And then I was like, oh, I need to go talk to you again. So for that period of time, anyway.
yeah. Yeah, I guess I've kept it consistent, even though, at some point, and it was gradual, right? I felt like, okay, I got this. I can, cope and learn how to deal with anxieties. But the funny thing about life is it's always changing, and you always have
Mm,
anxieties and things coming up. Like before actually I had my first child, I was really anxious about being a new parent, because it's this boundary you cross into, and a lot of new,
yeah.
you worry, am I going to be able to do it? Am I going to be good enough? There's just a whole bundle of things. So, I would say there's kind of always something, even
Yeah.
though it's, I'm definitely able to like cope on my own. And I think part of it is maybe age too, and just being more tired. I just don't have like a level of I used to. Um,
That's very true. Okay, well, that's good. And so you made it through college or university or whatever you guys call it. You did it, you graduated, you found a good job that you enjoyed. Eventually, I don't know, you probably
yeah,
didn't get it right
a
off
little
the
bit.
hop, but eventually. And so how are things going now? Because you talked about, you still sometimes have those moments where you catastrophize things.
For sure, for sure. And I think having children too. So I just had my second, who's 3 months, and
Oh,
you
just have a
undergo,
baby.
yeah, he's very cute. But you undergo like intense sleep deprivation, which can
Mm, yeah.
exasperate any kind of, stressors or anxieties you feel. Um, and a lot of times parents also have what's called intrusive thoughts, which can be, manifestation of anxiety or other things. And it's very common, but nobody really talks about it. And the second time actually hasn't been too bad, but it's that same kind of catastrophizing, like, oh, what if something happens? What if I do something wrong? But to an extreme. And I think honestly, just the realization that it's very common and talking about it like to family
Yeah.
helps quite a bit, because when you keep it bottled up and you're kind of ashamed of those intrusive thoughts or anxieties, that makes it so much worse. So yeah, but honestly, I think just being so tired, I don't really have like much space for the anxieties I used to. Um, and then it's also about practice, right? Like as time goes on, you are more used to situations that cause anxiety. Like I used to be very nervous
Yes.
speaking in a meeting at work. Like I had a huge mental block when it came to that. And now it's
Okay.
not a problem at all because I've done it so much. But, initially it was something I had to work on. I would just kind of clam up and feel very, very panicked about it. And honestly, I don't know that there was one specific coping mechanism. It was more just that exposure, right? I had to keep doing it. Otherwise I couldn't do my job. So
Hmm.
eventually do it enough where it's not quite as nerve wracking. And people say that about public speaking as well. When you have
Yeah.
to get up in a giant crowd, very stressful at first, but the more you do it, the easier it is.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why there's those organizations that like teach you public speaking and then it's practice and repetition. Um, okay, so intrusive thoughts. This is a good topic to talk about a little bit more. So I definitely have lots of intrusive thoughts. I know my kid does. I know a bunch of people who do. And I've actually seen quite a few videos on TikTok now talking about them more. Um, And so when I have intrusive thoughts, I think it's similar to what you were mentioning. They are the worst case scenarios. They are, oh, the bridge is going to collapse as I'm driving over it. There are things like that where it's like, this is completely insane. This is not going to happen. Like, I mean, technically, yes, it could happen, but the likelihood of it is so minuscule that why am I focusing on that? So that's just it's tough, right? When those intrusive thoughts come up. And I think I agree with you when you're talking about like with kids, it got worse with
Mm-hmm.
kids. Especially as they were going into school. So my stepdaughter, she's graduated high school now. My other one is in grade 11 now. And I think about when they were like when I was sending him when he was younger, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what's going to happen while you're there. And a million different thoughts go through the mind because you're not there. You can't do anything. You can't protect them. You have literally no control because they're not with you at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you get an intrusive thought, what is some of the steps that you might take to try and get over it in that moment?
Yeah, I think, trying to kind of push it away or be kind of aggressively like, oh no, I don't want this, makes it worse usually.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that realization that you mentioned where, whatever I'm thinking is like highly unlikely, to me, that's kind of
Yes.
the first step, like just remembering that and telling myself that, like the bridge example, right? Okay, it's highly unlikely
Yes.
to fall. But then sometimes that doesn't help, right? You're still like fixated on it. So then my like personal next step is just to say, okay, well, if it falls, like what am I going to do? And like I
Yeah.
can't really do that much. So I kind of just have to accept it, right? That's the logical conclusion of following the
Okay.
and that personally makes me feel better. I don't know if it would for everybody, but it's like at some point, your catastrophe, you would, if it happened, right, you would just have to deal with it and accept it and cope. So
Yeah.
a lot of mental energy though. So ideally, you would see that thought, kind of acknowledge it, and then hopefully, let it go. But it's so different for everyone. And I think I'm hoping, and I don't know if this was the case with you, that those kind of diminish as kids get bigger, right? They become more independent and self-sufficient
The
to some.
ones the ones about my kids did, but just in general, I have lots of intrusive
Uh-huh.
thoughts.
Well, and they're so common, and that actually always makes me feel better too. Like it's just, part of some kind of human psychological nature.
Hmm.
And you mentioned TikTok earlier, and I think oddly, TikTok is very helpful in sharing those stories and
Hmm.
helping people to realize they're not the only ones with like these intense thoughts. And people do it in kind of funny ways. I've seen
Yes,
montages.
that's what I like.
Yeah, it's great. I've seen one where the person, she like speaks her intrusive thoughts out loud to her partner who has none, and like just his like horrified reaction. But it's like comedic, right? And it
Yeah,
makes you feel better because like we've all been there, right? What if I said this out loud? People would think I'm insane.
right. Yeah, I know. So when I saw one similar to that, I started telling my husband, I was like, "Hey, I'm in this intrusive thought right now," and I tell him what it is, and he's like, "You're crazy. Like you're effed." I'm like, "What? You don't have those?" He goes, no, I don't. I'm like, oh, I just thought everybody did, right?
Well, a lot
But
of people do, right? But not everybody. Yeah,
yeah,
quite.
yeah, it's not uncommon, but not everybody does. So I don't know. I figured everybody did, right? So currently not my hubby. Whatever. I'll still keep sharing them with him because it's amusing to me. Um, so now in today's time frame, since I've been kind of chunking my questions at a times, um, how are you feeling now?
Um, that's a good question. How am I feeling now? I think there's actually a TikTok that captured this really well, where it was kind of the generational coping. And I'm
Ah,
a millennial, Gen X border, elder millennial, and that millennial coping skill was basically like disassociation because we've had so much like just
Yeah.
intense world events to live through and all that. And I would say that probably pretty much describes like how I'm feeling. Like not bad, but it's tough when there's so much information and so much like tragic, bad information coming at you, right? So it's kind of like, but at the same time, I can't disconnect from social media when I'm, writing and trying to promote my stories in my book. So it's
Yes.
a weird kind of disassociation where, okay, I'm seeing these horrible headlines and I just kind of have to scroll past. It's such a
Yeah.
thing. So it's a different kind of anxiety, I guess, where you just kind of go numb a little bit to all the information.
Yeah, that's a great point because a lot of people will say, just disconnect. And it's like, well, my business kind of relies on connection. So it's maybe putting some kind of barriers in place or, time frames. Hey, I will go on during this time and this time, but then I need to take a break because I need to take care of myself during whatever. And making sure that you sort of stick to those boundaries as best
Right.
as you can. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. I don't do that. But it's a thought that maybe might work.
Yeah, I think that helps. And I try to like stay pretty focused on my network as opposed to, and it's hard, right? You see something strange and you get sucked down a rabbit hole of like controversy and whatnot. And a lot of it's important to be aware of, but I find trying to stay focused on my networks, like the writing, reading community, the horror community, where I
Yes.
really find those kind of great connections and great people. Like that's kind of the rejuvenating, positive part of social media. So as much as possible,
Yes.
try to stay within that.
That's a good point. I like to stay in the cute, fluffy animal video world of social media. So much so that my animals have their own TikTok.
Oh, cute.
They're adorable. They have way more followers than I do because cute animals. So if anybody does want to follow them, it's at what I just changed their name because it made more sense. It was like at 4 cats 3 dogs on TikTok.
Check that out.
And so be sure to follow them. They're adorable. But yeah, so that's kind of true. You got to pick what thing you're going to be focused on. Like when you go down those rabbit holes, they can get pretty intense sometimes.
They can, and they're weirdly like enticing, right? Like in
Yes.
retrospect, I don't want to spend an hour reading about some random controversy that's not that important, right? But it's
But
like
yet, you do.
drama, right? It's like whatever compels us to watch reality shows or gossip. It's like
Yes.
that kind of thing where weirdly it's like kind of satisfying and kind of like a way. Um, so I'll get pulled into those, but I do try to limit the time for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you've kind of actually I'm gonna wait for that question. First, I'm gonna say, um, what what kind of advice would you give to somebody right now who's listening and saying, "Oh, I catastrophize things too."
Mhm.
What are you gonna tell them?
Yeah, I would say first thing for sure, if they can, if they've been thinking about it or undecided, seeing a therapist is like so, I just feel like everybody should do it. Um, and also to not be afraid to change, right? If you have somebody who's maybe not working well, it's like it's okay, you can change and you should, even though it's a little, it's a little bit of work, right? You have to find
Yeah.
somebody, go, whatever, but it's worth it to find a person who can connect with you. So, if somebody's kind of borderline thinking about it, not sure, not wanting to do it, I say, definitely if you can, it's always helpful. It's like,
Yeah.
why not? But for other tactics in terms of like catastrophizing or anxiety, I mean, there's a lot of tips out there, but the ones I like, any kind of self-reflection, like I was mentioning, where you
Yeah.
step back and say, okay, this is unlikely to happen. I'm still thinking about it for whatever reason, but let me at least realize this is, highly unlikely. And
Yes.
then if it makes you feel better to come up with a plan, okay, if that does happen, here's what I'm going to do. It's a
Yeah.
lot of thought investment, but it could help. I find journaling is very helpful.
Yeah.
Just to get my thoughts out on a page, and I don't know, there's something kind of therapeutic about it. Doesn't work for everybody, right? And maybe it's better for writers, I don't know, but I think it's worth trying if somebody hasn't tried it.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of cliched, but I do think exercise can be helpful because it just gets you to focus on something else for a little bit and kind of drain
Yes.
that anxious energy. So, they're like very kind of cookie cutter tips, but I think they're
But they
repeat.
work. That's why they're cookie cutter, because they work. There's something to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so go back to the question that I was gonna ask and then stopped. You've hinted at what you've written. Not really hinted, you've flat out kind of said it, but give us a little bit more about this brand new book that you just had released. It sounds very interesting. I love horror, I love Western,
Good.
I love the whole thing that you're talking about.
You might like it then. Yeah, it's called Melinda West Monster Gunslinger, and it's an action adventure horror novel set in the Old West, but with monsters. So I kind of some like vibes of it that people have mentioned, and I suggest as well as Buffy in terms of like the horror level.
Yeah.
It's not like super gruesome, depressing, whatever. It's more
Hmm.
adventure, right? So kind of Buffy fighting monsters, The Witcher kind of thing, Van Helsing. So those are that's kind of the
Okay.
level of horror where a lot of horror westerns are very intense. So this one is more of an adventure. I wanted it to be kind of a fun ride, so to
Yeah.
speak. And basically, it takes place in this alternate history during the Old West where monsters poured into the land.
Okay.
And there's a gunslinging couple in their late 20s, and they're kind of Bonnie and Clyde like, and they're monster exterminators. So they go around, exterminating monsters that range from flying giant scorpions to gremlins and whatnot. Um,
Gremlins. Ooh, I like that.
and then they accidentally release a demon in one of their escapades, and it steals souls. And then it steals their friend's soul. So they have to
Oh.
track this outlaw and battle a menagerie of monsters and kind of, go on this epic journey to stop a supernatural war. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of fun. And then one thing I wanted to do as well, aside from create this kind of entertaining adventure, was to have a lot of women characters really front and center as
Okay.
lawmakers, outlaws, whatnot.
Which
Just
is
kind
very different for Westerns, right? Westerns don't
of,
have a lot of that. So that's pretty cool.
yeah. So I figure it's my Western and it's
Right?
reimagined. So I'm just gonna do what I want.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. I like that. Okay. And what's it called again?
It's called Melinda West Monster Gunslinger.
I like it. And where do people find it?
Anywhere you buy books, it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can order it from your bookstore. So yeah, pretty much wherever you would get a book.
Excellent. And where do people follow you?
Yeah, so my website is kcgrifant, Grifant, .com, and I'm on all the social medias as KC Griffin.
Excellent. And we're going to stick those links down in the description below. So everyone can very easily follow you and get this really interesting book. I think it'll be good. Yeah. So go out, go read it. Unless you really, really don't like horror westerns, then I don't know, you're just crazy. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So any last words that you want to share?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me on. And for any listeners, there's a lot of advice and coping skills out there. And you have to take care of yourself before anything else. So that would be my parting bit of advice, I guess.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, even though it's early for you. What
Thank you.
time is it, by the way?
Oh, it's 8:40, so it's not too bad, but the baby's up at night, so our
Yeah,
sleeps are all over
yeah,
the place.
yeah. It could be worse though.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So thank you so much.
Too.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.